I'm feeling very good about the Celtics scenario in keeping Kyrie Irving here, and I think
we need a dominant team in the East. We need a dominant in the East, especially with LeBron going over to LA. That's a nightmare for the East. If they were to water the talent down in the East, again, it might be somewhat interesting in the postseason, but it's definitely not going to be interesting in the finals, right? And that's the biggest concern here in my mind, is that if the Western Conference Finals continues to be considered the finals, that's a problem. That's a problem for basketball. Now, do you think the East is really as weak as it appears, with the Celtics way up at top? I know we've talked about the Raptors, etc. And if they pulled, Kyrie out, and then there was that budding team in New York, that would be a great team, and there would be two really good teams in the East that way, plus whatever Milwaukee's doing, plus whatever the Raptors continue to do, although their window gets shorter and shorter, and some other teams that are building. But you get my point. The strength at the top of the Western Conference is unprecedented. It seemed like it was balancing out a little bit during the KG era with LeBron in Miami, and it's really gone the other way entirely once again. And I think that's a big problem for basketball, and I think they need Kyrie in Boston for that reason.
Yeah, and I don't think that moving Kyrie to New York with Durant is enough to create the super team that battles the Warriors. I don't think that's. I just don't see that scenario fully formed. Even if you say Jimmy Butler's there, you said Jimmy Butler, Durant, and Kyrie. I just don't. There's just, the Knicks are a dumpster fire. They've always been a dumpster fire. My whole time watching basketball, even when they're supposedly good, they were disgusting, an awful team. The time that when they made the finals and lost to the Spurs, that was an awful team. It was a complete joke because of the lockout. The time they lost in 7 games to the Rockets, that Knicks team sucked. I hated them. I'm so over the New York Knicks, and so yeah, there's no way. You need to keep Boston strong, and Philly will come up. I think Milwaukee's going to be better with Coach Bud there.
Definitely shouldn't have left Philly out of that conversation, because we don't even know. They might even end up with Kawhi, but it's looking less and less likely. But they still could. And they've got a ton of young talent, and so certainly that team is on the rise. Are they going to compete with the Warriors in the next year or two? No, they're definitely not. They just need more experience. But will they be a competitor in the Eastern Conference and, top 4? I think pretty easily they're going to be top 4 for the next, several years.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. And I think, to your earlier point, your earlier question of like, well, what does this mean, East versus West? I think it's a lot closer than people want to say. Yes, Warriors are number 1. I think we all understand that. I think the Celtics are ahead of the Rockets. I think they will be. I think it's 1, 2, 3.
2 competitive matchups last season, certainly. Absolutely. And Chris Paul might have just handcuffed that franchise from being able to get better. What else are you going to do? You really didn't have a choice, but it might only give you a 1 to 2 year with a major anchor after that.
Yeah, and go out and not re-sign Ariza and Mbah Moute, and we're going to get the corpse of Carmelo Anthony. I don't think that's going to do it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a rejuvenation machine.
Well, let's be honest. Even the Chris Paul and the Harden thing was an experiment. It's one that worked out beautifully, but it was an experiment. Harden loves to have the ball in his hands, and so does Chris Paul. So the fact that meshed, but then you're going to add Carmelo Anthony, to your point, that's a recipe for a backfiring disaster.
It's not going to work. I think right. You're going to see the Rockets. They're going to be on the down slope here. Celtics obviously in the up. I think you look at a lot of those teams in the East. I think the Raptors could be interesting, especially if they're the ones that make the deal for Kawhi. The Sixers. If you just look at the West, for a second. Outside of the Rockets and the Warriors, who's next? Are we talking about OKC?
Yeah, I think we're still going to go OKC, but now we're balancing out a little bit.